The Void Within. Chapter 6. The Hollow Awakening. Stacks of paper cluttered the living room floor. Medical records, transcripts, personnel files. Some bore the Paragon Collective's insignia. Others were half-burned or blacked out by redaction bars that only made the contents feel more sinister. Cairo sat cross-legged in the center of it all, eyes darting between documents, his fingers smudged with ink and dust. Omari leaned over a cluttered coffee table, flipping through a folder with focused intensity. Red-marked photos, news clippings, and a printed family tree were tacked haphazardly across the wall. Vivian's name was circled in red. Magnolia Creed's name sat faded but never crossed out. The silence between them was a thick humming, comfortable and heavy. Cairo broke it. "I found something," he said, holding up a cracked leather-bound notebook so old it smelled like mildew. He flipped it open and pointed to a margin note beside a list of dates and names. Creed bloodline markers unstable. Reassessment ordered. See Emma Creed archive. Omari read it aloud. "Magnolia. She keeps showing up like a ghost," Cairo muttered. "Every file, every name that matters. Somehow she's at the center of everything." Omari rubbed his temple. And still no death record, no obituary, no confirmation of anything. Cairo looked toward the board. What if it's not about being alive? What if it's about being present? Omari didn't answer. Instead, he opened his laptop and plugged in a small encrypted drive, recovered from the server he had stolen during the lab breach the week before. After a tense few moments of typing, a hidden directory unfolded. One file glared back, M. Creed, archive. Confidential inside were blurred scans, medical diagrams, early-stage embryos, women listed only as vessels. Omari scrolled until one entry made both their stomachs lurch. Subject 17, A, Omari R, status escaped, unfinished. Cairo backed away instinctively. "That's you!" Omari's jaw clenched. "Yeah, and that means whatever they were planning, it didn't end when Vivian ran." Cairo felt his breath catch. It started again, with me. He stood slowly, walking to the board, tracing a line between Magnolia's name and his own. "How much of this did Mom know?" Omari walked over with another folder, worn and thick. "Enough. I pulled this from the drive too." He handed Cairo a file labeled Subject V, Creed, Carter, Psychological Evaluation. "Where did that even come from?" Cairo asked. "A break-in, technically. It was buried under dummy code on the server. Whoever left it didn't expect anyone to look twice." Cairo exhaled slowly, letting the weight of that settle. "So, all this was just sitting there? Like some digital attic?" "They always leave something behind," Omari said, sitting down beside him. "Arrogance does that." They studied the documents in silence again, a growing sense of urgency prickling at the edge of every breath. "There's a pattern," Omari said, laying out several personnel logs. "Every 10 to 15 years, a transfer of power, always through the Creed line, always timed with a ritual, and every time, someone dies." Cairo stared at the names. Grandfather, cousin, then Nolan Carter. "Your father's death wasn't random," Omari said. "The autopsy was incomplete, no talk screen, no follow-up. That's not an oversight. That's a cover-up." Cairo felt his throat tighten. "She's been part of this cult, this thing, the whole time?" Omari shook his head. "I don't think she wanted to be. But she's in deep now." They pulled her back in. The room felt colder. Outside, thunder rolled low across the city, distant but steady, like a warning crawling in on the wind. "We're running out of time," Omari said. Vivian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, glass in hand, staring blankly at the skyline. The wine had long gone warm. Her reflection stared back at her, not perfectly aligned, just off. A heartbeat behind her own movements, a smile that lingered too long. She blinked and the glass shimmered. Magnolia's face flashed across the pane, older, crueler, and smiling like she knew exactly what was happening. Vivian turned sharply. There was nothing, just the echo of her own breathing. She paced across the room, heels clicking against polished marble. On the coffee table, old photographs lay scattered, pulled from a hidden drawer she hadn't touched in years. One photo caught her eye, her younger self cradling a baby Cairo. But something was wrong. Someone else was in the frame, once familiar, now smudged. No matter how she tilted the photo, the figure remained blurred, erased by time or something far darker. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. "Omari," she whispered, like the name had been trapped beneath her tongue for years. Then her voice shifted, becoming distant. Hollow. Words slipped from her lips in a language she didn't recognize. "Esho nox amari, vel ketra, dos ilun." She blinked, startled by her own voice. The glass in her hand cracked sharply, blood beading along her palm. "Not again," she whispered, more to herself than anything else. The fireplace roared to life, unlit just moments ago. Drawn by some unseen force, she stepped forward, clutching the photo. A strange calm washed over her as she fed it into the flames. From behind her, a voice whispered, not out loud, but inside her, "You can't keep them from us, not forever." She spun around. No one was there. And yet, the mirror by the hallway shimmered again. Magnolia stood in it now, no longer just a flicker, smiling, patient. Vivian backed away, hand pressed to her chest, breath shallow. For the first time in years, she felt like a child again, trapped in a house of secrets she thought she had escaped. And the void? It was waking. Inside her, beneath the Creed estate, ritual chamber. It was a hidden ritual chamber, deep beneath the Creed estate, older than the building itself, its foundation laid in the name of the void. Black stone, flickering candlelight, carved walls with blood-worn sigils. The air thrums with unseen energy. The chamber pulsed with silence, alive, breathing beneath the surface of the city like a buried heart. Ambrosia stood at the altar, robed in deep crimson. Around her, new followers knelt, heads bowed, their lips moving in rhythm to the rising chant. Their voices layered like an ancient hymn, the words twisting the air into heat and shadow. She raised her hands. Before her, a basin of blackened glass shimmered, filled with blood drawn in silence and sacrifice. Around the room, sigils burned, etched in ash and old bone, glowing unnaturally as the ritual reached its crescendo. "This is the will of the hollow path," Ambrosia intoned. "This is the echo of blood." The sigils began to swirl, drawn into the air like smoke curling into shape, serpents of memory devouring the light. A shadow moved behind her. Ambrosia didn't turn. She didn't have to. She felt her, Magnolia, not flesh, not spirit. Something in between. Her voice slithered through the dark like silk dipped in venom. "You are not the end." Ambrosia's breath caught. The fire dimmed. Magnolia's image hovered behind her, not fully formed, a shade made of memory, fury, and void. Her younger face, untouched by time, stared with bottomless eyes. "You are the gate." Ambrosia trembled, but she did not break. She stepped forward, voice cracking but resolute. "Then open me." A gust of air surged through the chamber, cold, grave deep. Candles flickered wildly, the sigils flared blinding white, then vanished. One of the followers collapsed in a spasm, whispering a chant not yet taught to them. Blood bubbled in the basin. Ambrosia turned her face to the altar and whispered, more to Magnolia than anyone else. "The vessels are awakening, the Creed blood burns with purposes, and when the offering is made..." Magnolia's smirk returned, barely visible through the haze. "The void will wear them all." The black liquid surged, showing flashes. Vivian, chanting unknowingly, Cairo clutching a strange relic, Omari bleeding in a circle of candles. The hollow path had begun its rise. Elsewhere, Academy rooftop. Cairo leaned against the chain-link fence, hoodie pulled tight against the evening chill. The sky above was bruised with dusk, burnt orange bleeding into violet, the day's last light surrendering to night. The wind curled cold around him, and the city below breathed, unaware it was standing above a chasm. It was quiet up here. Too quiet. He pulled out his phone and reread Omari's last message. "Stay close to her. But be careful. Nothing since this morning." His fingers tightened around the phone. He couldn't stop replaying what they'd discovered. Files, rituals, bodies, his mother's voice when it slipped into something wrong. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his notebook. pages filled with fragments, symbols, whispered names, markings he found on Vivian's wrist, a hollowed-out eye, a word she mumbled in sleep like a prayer or curse. He circled one word again, Sheol. Then a phrase, the gate must hunger. He didn't know what it meant, only that it came with chills. Then, creak. The rooftop door groaned open behind him. He turned slowly. A girl stood in the entrance, wearing the same academy uniform he wore for school. He didn't recognize her face. Her hair hung limp, her skin too pale beneath the flickering rooftop light. But it was her eyes that froze him, too wide, too dark, unmoving. You shouldn't be up here alone, she said softly. Cairo stiffened. Do I know you? She smiled, but it was the kind of smile meant to unsettle, not reassure. Not yet, but I've known you your whole life. He stepped back instinctively. Her voice didn't seem to belong to her. It echoed, like something else was speaking through her. You're being watched, Cairo. The hollow sees you, like it saw your brother, like it sees your blood. His breath caught. Who are you? The girl tilted her head, studying him as if he were an unfinished sculpture. We're all part of something. But you, she said, you're marked. Magnolia's debt isn't buried, it's inherited. The gate doesn't forget. She held out her hand and passed him something, a folded piece of paper, rough and damp like it had been buried. Then, without another word, she turned and stepped backward into the shadows, gone as if she had never been there at all. Cairo opened the note with trembling fingers, scrawled in dark ink, one word, interruption. He glanced down at his notebook again, and a new word was etched across the top of the page, though he hadn't written it. Gate. The woods, the hidden witness. The safe house was buried in the woods, an hour beyond the last paved road. The path to it was overgrown, nearly erased by time and silence. Half the roof had caved in, and the porch sagged under decades of creeping vines. Omari stepped over broken boards and dug through the warped frame of the front door. Inside, the air was thick with damp rock, old ash, and something older. Memory, maybe. Or grief. She waited for him in the back room. An elderly woman, draped in moth-eaten layers, sat beside a rusted stove that hadn't seen fire in years. One eye was clouded white, the other sharp and knowing. The flickering candlelight played tricks across her face. You took your time, she rasped, as if she'd been expecting him. Omari stayed standing. Your name was in the personnel archive, cross-referenced with Paragon security clearance. You disappeared from their rolls after 1999. She smirked. You found the redacted list then? You're digging in dangerous soil, boy. He stepped closer. You were Creed. That's why you're still breathing. They don't kill their own unless they have to. She laughed, dry and papery. Still breathing. Barely. But you're a ghost that came back wrong. He said nothing, but his jaw clenched. She peered closer. Your eyes, I remember them. Magnolia had eyes like those, hungry, starving, even when she smiled. Omari pulled a photo from his coat pocket and placed it on the table between them. It was old, creased, water-damaged. Vivian held a baby in her arms, her face sharp with love and fear. There was a man beside her, but his features were blurred, half burned away. The old woman recoiled slightly. Vivian, she muttered. So, she did run. Vivian ran to protect me, but from what? From what they did to her brother. He was the offering, her twin. Vernon? I never knew she had a twin. That must have been him. The guy in the photo, blurred out. It must have been a painful memory to bear, seeing your other half sacrificed. She left after they sacrificed her twin, Omari said quietly. She saw what they did to him, what they wanted to do to me. The woman's good eye closed, not in grief, but reverence. Twins are sacred to the hollow, two halves of a wound, one dies, the other opens. That was always the Creed way. Omari sat across from her, tension barely contained. Was I meant to be next? She opened her eyes again. You weren't just next. You were the vessel, born with clean Creed blood. And you were born under the eclipse. Vivian running didn't stop it. It just delayed the ritual. Why? Omari demanded. Why me? Vivian's blood gave you the potential. The timing of your birth sealed it. That's how the Hollow chooses. The Hollow doesn't just feed on blood, it feeds on intention, timing, lineage. That's what makes a vessel. That's what makes you. He looked down. She saved me. No, the woman said, voice like cracking bark. She interrupted them. There's a difference. An interruption creates imbalance, a gap. A debt. Her gaze sharpened. And that kind of debt doesn't vanish. It waits. It shifts. Omari leaned forward, shadows deepening across his face. It's waiting for Cairo now. The woman didn't respond at first. Only the sound of the wind filtered in through the cracks in the walls, low, like a moan. You're not just his brother, she said finally. You're the crack in the ritual, but if they get to him, they'll seal it. Finish what you escaped. Omari rose, his fists were clenched. Then they won't get to him. The old woman smiled, and for a moment, if you want to stop them, you need to stop her. Ambrosia, she was Magnolia's finest heir. But she's not leading this anymore. Omari's breath caught. Then who is? Her clouded eye drifted toward the door. She is. The Hollow wears her bones like armor. Magnolia's not dead, boy. She's becoming. The wind outside the safe house howled like something mourning. Omari stepped just beyond the porch, the photo still clutched in his hand. The woman's words echoed, but so did something older, buried in memory. He was 2, maybe 3. The world was tall and strange. He remembered her arms, warm, frantic. Vivian had scooped him up from his small bed in the Creed estate, cradling him against her chest as her body shook with sobs. The halls were dark. Not night dark, but wrong dark. Candles flickering like nervous eyes. She didn't run at first. She listened. A scream tore through the estate, the final scream of her twin brother as the ritual ended. Vivian gasped, covered Omari's ears, whispered a name like a curse. Ambrosia. Then she bolted, down corridors lined with ancestral paintings, through a bookcase that swung open with a groan, into a tunnel that reeked of mold and iron. She carried him the whole way, barefoot, bleeding, trembling. In the tunnel's final bend, she collapsed, rocked him silently in the cold dirt. I won't let them take you too, she breathed. I won't be her. I won't be them. Back in the present, Omari blinked hard. The safe house creaked behind him, the trees swaying like silent sentries. Vivian hadn't just saved him. She had betrayed an entire bloodline to do it. And now, the debt was circling back, through Cairo. Underpass, cafe, edge of the city. The cafe was tucked beneath an overpass, the kind of place people pass without seeing. Graffiti stained the concrete walls, and the hum of traffic overhead filled the quiet gaps between conversations. Omari sat at a corner table, hoodie drawn low, eyes scanning every reflection in the window. The coffee in front of him had gone cold. Back corner, 2 exits, 1 blind spot. Omari had already memorized them. Cairo slid into the seat across from him, pulling off his jacket. You beat me here, he said softly. Omari gave a faint smirk. Had to make sure it was safe. Cairo nodded, then looked down, fingers fidgeting with the napkin. Things feel different now. Like something cracked open and won't close again. They are different, Omari said. We're not standing on the sidelines anymore. Cairo met his eyes. So, what now? Omari leaned forward. Now, we stay ahead of them. I talked to someone, an old Creed. Off the grid, she confirmed everything we've been piecing together. You're not imagining any of it. Cairo swallowed hard. I thought I was just collateral, but I'm central to this. You were born into it, but that doesn't mean you're bound to it. Omari paused. You're not alone in this, Cairo. I've got you. Cairo's expression flickered, softer now. I know. A brief silence settled between them, one filled not with tension, but understanding. Omari broke it. Vivian, how is she? She's slipping, Cairo admitted. She spaces out, talks to herself sometimes. Her voice changes like someone else is speaking through her. Omari's eyes darkened. They're pulling her back in, through memory, through blood. Cairo hesitated, then reached into his bag. There's something else. He pulled out his notebook, Flipping it open to a page filled with strange, spiraling symbols, Omari leaned in, studying them. You drew these? I don't remember doing it, Cairo admitted. One second I was trying to write out what I saw at school. The next, this. At the center of the page, scrawled in jagged ink, was a phrase that turned Omari cold. Let the gate see you. The penthouse. Midnight visit. Later that night, the penthouse was awash in candlelight. The furniture had been subtly rearranged, just enough to feel unfamiliar. Shadows bent strangely around the corners. Cairo stepped out of his room, following the soft sound of voices. When he reached the living room, he stopped. Vivian sat on the velvet couch, spine perfectly straight, eyes unfocused. Her wine glass dangled loosely from her fingers. She didn't blink. Ambrosia stood beside her, hand resting gently on Vivian's shoulder. Her voice was low, rhythmic, like a lullaby meant for something ancient. Good evening, Cairo, she said without turning. He froze. What did you do to her? She's safe, Ambrosia said softly. Just quieted. Her soul has been stretched thin lately. I'm helping her rest. Cairo stepped forward, anger rising. You shouldn't be here. But I am, she replied, finally turning to face him. Her eyes gleamed, not with malice, but with terrible calm. I was always meant to be. Yes. Her smile was gentle, but it didn't reach her eyes. And I've watched from afar long enough to know you're waking up. Whether you're ready or not. Cairo didn't respond, but something in him bristled. She took a step closer. You're dreaming of the gate, aren't you? She asked. Feeling the pressure behind your eyes, the itch in your bones when the moon dips too low. He tried to hide the flicker of recognition in his face, but her smile widened. It's not a curse, she said softly. It's inheritance. You're blooming, Cairo. The hollow is recognizing its own. I don't want it, he said, jaw tight. Whatever this is, whatever you are. Ambrosia tilted her head. Want has nothing to do with it. Blood remembers, even when you forget. Her hand brushed his cheek, so light it barely registered. But where her fingers passed, the air seemed to still. Something unseen rippled beneath his skin, fleeting and deep. Cairo flinched and stepped back, a shiver running through him. She withdrew her hand unfazed. A simple gift. A little protection for when the veil thins. He stared at her unsettled. What did you just do? Nothing you'll notice yet, she said, brushing invisible dust from her coat. But in time, when the others come looking, you'll be glad I left a mark. Vivian let out a soft gasp behind them, eyes fluttering as if waking from a dream, but she didn't speak. She was still not fully present, caught in some liminal trance. Ambrosia turned back toward the door. I won't stay, she said, voice light again. I just wanted to see you, to remind you that no matter what they tell you, this path, your path, was always going to find you. She paused in the doorway and looked over her shoulder. Tell Omari to hurry, she added, almost wistfully. The hollow is hungry, and debts like his don't go unpaid forever. Then she was gone, her scent fading like smoke, her footsteps never touching the floor. Cairo stood there, frozen, heart pounding in a rhythm not quite his own. Behind him, Vivian finally exhaled and wept, the sorrow rising from somewhere too deep to name. The silence in the penthouse seemed to hold its breath as she passed through the entryway. Cairo remained still, the mark still tingling on his skin, though he had no idea what it truly meant yet. Vivian, still trembling from her trance-like state, glanced toward the door with a mix of dread and anticipation. Ambrosia's steps echoed down the hall as she moved toward the elevator, her gaze fixed on something distant. As the elevator doors closed, she smirked to herself. It was time. The cult sanctum. Moments later, deep beneath the earth in the heart of the sanctum, a quiet power pulsed. The stone walls seemed to hum with the whispers of ancient rituals, and the air was thick with anticipation. The circle had been drawn long ago, its symbols inscribed with care, and the dark magic that had flowed through the Creed bloodline for centuries awaited its final awakening. Ambrosia entered the sanctum, the heavy door creaking as it closed behind her. The flickering candlelight cast long, eerie shadows across the room, but Ambrosia seemed unbothered, as though the dark presence in the air was a familiar companion. She moved with purpose, stepping to the center of the chamber where the ritual circle lay. The room grew colder as she raised her arms, fingers tracing unseen patterns in the air. At first, it was a faint tremor, an undercurrent of power. But then, the shadows on the floor began to shift, growing longer, darker, more restless. Tendrils of darkness spiraled from the ground, twisting around her legs, up her arms, as she stood at the center of the circle. Ambrosia closed her eyes, a breath of satisfaction escaping her lips. "It begins." The words were a quiet, almost imperceptible whisper, but they carried the weight of centuries of preparation. The ritual was no longer a future event, it was happening now. The hollow, a force so ancient it could not be contained, was stirring. Vivian's penthouse. Night. Vivian's breath came in shallow gasps as she sat on the edge of the bed, her mind still clouded from the trance. The room felt unnaturally still, the night air thick with a tension she couldn't explain. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone. It lit up with a cold glow, but the screen remained unresponsive, as if something was blocking her connection to the outside world. Her eyes darted to the window, the city lights below, but there was no comfort to be found in the view. She felt a pull, a whisper inside her head, soft yet insistent. The hollow calls. Her voice came out in a breathless murmur, as if saying the words aloud would summon something terrible. She couldn't remember what she had been dreaming, only that the name, Magnolia, had echoed in her mind, sharp and suffocating. She looked toward the door, the faintest tremor in her chest. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And she knew, deep down, that there was no escaping it. The hollow was moving. Meanwhile, across the city, Omari's apartment. Omari's room was filled with the kind of silence that could only come in the dead of night. He woke with a start, a chill running down his spine as he sat up. His breath came fast, his skin clammy as if he'd been dragged from a dream into something cold and unwelcoming. The air around him felt wrong. The wind was unnatural, howling through the space without any open windows. He rose from the bed, the room heavy with something he couldn't place, something that gnawed at him. He glanced at the window. Outside, the wind whipped violently, but there was no reason for it. No storm, no movement in the air. Something was watching him. He reached for the photo on his nightstand, the old creased picture of Vivian holding a baby. The edges were cold, as though the paper had been exposed to something unnatural. "It was never just you," the whisper came again, louder this time, a voice not his own, female, frayed and ancient, as if the shadows themselves were speaking through her. Omari froze. That voice. He didn't recognize it, but something in his blood did. And, in another room, far from both, Cairo's bedroom. Cairo awoke with a jolt, his body slick with sweat. His chest rose and fell in rapid, uneven breaths. The remnants of his dream lingered, a vast, unending void, dark and oppressive. 2 thrones. One shattered and cold, the other pulsing with light. The thrones called to him, beckoning. The broken one felt like something lost, something that needed to be reclaimed. The one of light felt like a beacon, pulling him forward with a force he couldn't resist. "You are the gate," the voice had whispered, clear and cold, like it had come from the very void itself. He sat up, panting, his heart racing. The room was silent, but the weight of the vision still pressed against his chest. The hollow was closer now. He could feel it in his bones. "It's coming for me." He grabbed the notebook from his nightstand, flipped to a blank page, and began sketching. The shattered throne, jagged and hollow, and the one of light, radiant but distant. He didn't know why, only that he had to. Like choosing between them wasn't just a dream. It was a warning. The world around him felt heavier now, as though the air itself had thickened with the weight of something ancient. He looked down at his hands, feeling the mark Ambrosia had left on him, a cold burn that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The shadows in the sanctum seemed to come alive as the ritual reached its climax. The air was charged with an energy that crackled with unspoken power. Ambrosia stood at the center, her arms still outstretched, her voice a whisper of triumph. The tendrils of darkness had fully enveloped her, and now they seemed to stretch out, reaching for the very walls of the sanctum as though they were trying to break free. In the darkness, there was a presence, something ancient, something that had waited for this moment to unfold. It was not just a force, it was a hunger. Ambrosia's lips curled into a satisfied smile. The hollow had awakened, and there would be no stopping it now. This is the end of chapter 6. The Hollow Awakening. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe.